Hello, everyone. Welcome to Now That's Debatable. This is your host, Fantastic Facade, and today we are going to be discussing the implications of discovering alien life. I am joined, as normal, with my co-host, Geocentric Skeptic. Geo, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, perfect. So I am going to go ahead and get our contested points page up because it's
All
not a thanks
right.
for watching page. So don't think we're going away yet. We just got started. Sorry for the few-minute delay. We were just tidying up the pages and whatnot, getting our discussion points in place. And today is 2222. I think
Ah,
I missed a two. It's 222222. There's all the twos.
weird.
And it's a Tuesday, so you're welcome for that
Yeah.
really nerdy, stupid thing. Um, but if you're at all interested, today is the one of the last sequential single number digits that we're going to have, probably in our lifetime. Um,
Oh, sad.
yeah. So because there's no 23 for months, so this may be the last one. So tonight at 22:22, if you know military time, so at 10:22 p.m. you should do something that you've never done before because it'll be 22222222 at 2222. So, with that in mind, today we're discussing the idea of the implications of coming into contact with alien life. And that means, you know, there's a lot to consider. And Geo and I were actually talking before the podcast on the phone about different scenarios in which we would potentially come into contact with alien life. And because of that, there's a few that we're going to cover. And if there's something specific that we need to cover or you would like us to cover, then you can mention it to us. But with that in mind, we're probably going to stick to two or three specific scenarios for the duration of the podcast and try to get a little deeper into each of those than taking on every conceivable possibility of the idea of coming into contact with human life because I think it would be a little easier and it would take an infinite amount of time. You good with that, Geo?
Yeah, I'm down. Works for me.
So, is there anywhere specific you would like us to start?
We can talk about let's see, meaningful communication.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
So uh, there's a good reason to use the term meaningful or impactful or whatever when talking about communication because when we say that we basically mean like being able to understand each other at least a very basic level. Would you agree?
Yeah, pretty much being able to explain some sort of complex idea because you can communicate with a dog, right?
Yep.
Like you throw a stick, you can communicate that you want him to bring it back, but that's not the level of communication that I'm talking about.
Yeah. I mean,
I
I
mean,
think
some sort of meaningful, complex idea.
yeah, and to even go that far or a little further is that has to go both ways. So
Yeah.
because that's the core concept of communication. You can talk to your dog, but other than perhaps like giving indications of pain or that it needs to go to the restroom by a long sense of training, the dog can't really communicate anything back. So communication is definitely a two-way street, and being able to communicate or communicating with aliens is something that would be extremely important. I think on all fronts. If we were to make contact with alien life, communication would not only be the biggest desire, but it would be the ultimate necessity because without it, we'd just be ships passing each other in the night.
Really? I think we see in the movies where they come here, they have some sort of technology where they can automatically um, translate languages or something like that, or maybe they're speaking a language that's not too different
Hmm.
from us that we can employ linguists to uh, be able to extract, ideas from them. I think that's a huge assumption. Especially we're talking about aliens who have a very different biology, a very different evolutionary history from humans. But think about this. A chimpanzee, they share over 99% of their DNA with humans.
Hmm.
But you can't can't have any form of meaningful communication with a chimpanzee.
That's correct.
Just think of how
How,
different that is, and
however,
consider just the
I think,
similarities between chimpanzees.
yeah, I think we should take something into consideration here, being that assuming that both species have some advanced form of language, and I mean that in any sense, whether it be writing or verbal communication like humans do, most of the time, unless you have some sort of speech impediment or you're mute or something along those lines, in which even then we have hand signs that we can communicate
Hmm.
very complex and sophisticated ideas. So when talking about something like, I won't use chimpanzees, I'll use ants because I know the way they communicate with each other is by secreting vomit, and the smell, pheromones or hormones or whatever that's secreted, is basically how they talk to each other. But at a very basic sense, it is not at all nearly as complex as something like the most basic sentence for humans. So if we assume
Yeah,
that both species have a sophisticated form of communication, even in their own right, even if biological diversity is part of the the big one of the biggest hurdles. If they have a
eh,
sophisticated language, helping overcome that would be a priority, I think.
yeah. I mean, I think it'd be safe to assume that we would have more in common with an ant than we would with the alien civilization.
That's fine, but
Or
I mean, so like we know that ants don't have vocal communication, right? We know they communicate with
yeah.
something like pheromones, right?
Hmm.
But if you and I spoke completely different languages, we could still, as long as it was spoken, language, at least to the level of whatever. If I don't speak your language, you don't speak mine, but we both know verbal tones and cues, right? We both could point at something
Yeah,
and say our word for it in our own language.
sure.
Even at a most basic level, there's no way you could ever do that with an ant because A, no verbal communication, B, their concept of language and things that are of such nature don't exist. That's why I said it would be
Hmm.
very helpful to assume that if they're sufficiently advanced to make contact, that they also have a sophisticated language system. Verbal would
What
be
what if
preferable, but
their
I mean,
language system isn't even verbal?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Verbal would
E-
be preferred, but
Yeah,
there are things like body languages and hand signs and
yeah,
written communication that we could also, humans all still use and utilize. So even if it's not verbal, I mean, unless it would be something like direct mental communication, which is
hmm
supposedly hypothetically possible, but like transmission of your like internal mental thoughts from one being to another, if it's written or if it's signals or hand signs or whatever, then it's still quite possible it would be easier to break down, assuming they have the intelligence for such a language system. The big difference with like ants and chimpanzees is that there's no way that
What
their
about our
communications.
intelligence?
Well, we may not be
Like
sophisticated enough to understand
we
some of
we
their
not we may not be
concepts.
smart enough to understand them.
That's correct. I think that's possible. I'm just saying, just like an ant to us is so unintelligent that it can't grasp things like basic sentence structure or mathematics, we may have that issue with them. But at some level, we would at least get the basics down. Like we could understand, what one might call Earth. Like you may have a hand signal to define our planet.
Yeah.
And that would be
I,
extremely meaningful communication, by the way.
yeah. I think the the best way to ground a common language, I would expect their math to be very similar. Like they may not have like the same system, but they would employ some method of math that, I mean, if they're building ships, if they're employing physics, you know, even though their descriptions of the laws of physics may be different from the way we describe them, ultimately we're describing the same thing. And since we're describing the same thing, we would have some common foundation to speak from, and that would be math. When I say speak, I mean it's a um, sort of speak, not necessarily speaking with your mouth, but you'd have at least some sort of common foundation to communicate with.
Yeah, and I mean, uh, but even at that point, like there has to be some way in which the communication is carried out, be that verbally or written or hand signs or something. So
Yeah.
at its most basic, I think of transcribers for works in other languages, and I'll mention a specific linguist who came across a very interesting case in language, and that language was Hixkariana, which was discovered in a tribal village in Brazil. And it was unlike any spoken language or verbal language that we had previously encountered. And it was essentially the exact opposite of the way that English works. And they didn't have rules for things like cardinal numbers. Um, so even though the person that was working on translating their language knew things like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the people of this of that spoke Hixkariana only knew things like 1, 2, and then many.
Yeah.
So there was even difficulties when doing that, but it got to the point where there's now people that speak Hixkariana to the point of fluency. So
Mhm.
they still have this sufficiently advanced language structure that was used, and fortunately in this case it was verbal. But at some point you'd have to have the complex structure of language, no matter how it's transmitted.
Yeah, I think math would be a good way to use it. I mean, like, assuming they had the technology to reach Earth, they probably have a more complex numerical system than one to a many.
Yeah, probably. I mean, if
I think,
they're
yeah,
sufficient enough to either make contact directly with Earth or to send a signal on which Earth could be received, they probably have a advanced mathematical formula to ensure that happens.
yeah,
So, I mean, I think it's extremely important and probably one of the most important things that like is going to be necessary, because without it, essentially all communication is broken down, and therefore we have no idea their desires, needs, or anything else. We couldn't learn anything from them, and that's terrifying.
yeah. Well, at least not directly.
Yeah, I mean, indirectly through observation. I
Yeah,
mean, we could,
yeah.
you know, pull the old let's perform experiments on them, but
Hmm.
probably better
Or
ways of going
we
about
could
that.
share inventions, right? Or like share share experiments. Like, I guess maybe send them some uh ionized nucleus and show, hey, this is what happens when you heat up matter, the electrons do blah blah blah. You can create a plasma. I mean, you may be able to understand some sort of concept, and then you could point at the sun and they'd be like, oh, same concept. That's what the sun does.
Yeah, 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 I'm with you there.
What do you think about their their demeanor, as far as being like hostile or friendly? That's one of the main concerns of most of Earth's defense agencies.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think the biggest concern is if what if there we discover this life, or there's contact with alien life and they're hostile. I mean, that just obviously sends concern into, I mean, almost what I would consider anyone who could fathom the concept. Uh, that would be, I think, problematic. Because if they have sufficiently advanced technology to contact us, or they contact us first, chances are they have more at least in many cases, more sufficient technology than we currently have. So that means we're
I didn't
in
hear that last sentence. My internet went out, or maybe it's yours. I'm not sure. But can you
uh, yeah,
repeat
sure.
what you said like 10 seconds ago?
Yeah, no worries. I was just saying it implies that if they contact us first, their technology, at least in forms of communication, or at least their knowledge on our existence, was prior to our own.
Yeah.
So that can be, I mean, concerning because that means that they're, you know, at least,
It could enslave us,
yeah.
or
I mean,
maybe like drain
yeah,
Earth of its resources.
yeah. I mean,
There'd be nothing we could do about it.
potentially there would be sufficiently advanced to, or even more advanced than we are, and that's
Yeah.
terrifying.
We want to do some experiments. Listen, what happens when you stop tectonic plates?
Yeah, and I mean, like, or like for instance, they come from an environment in which certain things are typical or normal for their species, and they're like, oh, well, surely that's no problem here on Earth. They start making false assumptions, like you don't need oxygen because we don't. Like, what happens if we put you in this oxygen-free environment?
Yeah, they may not need to breathe at all. You
Yeah,
know, I mean, there's a lot of things they may be confused about.
yeah, and I mean that goes
Even
back
the
into
fact that we
the
sleep. You know, we go into a quasi comatose state for 1/3 of our life. You know, that might come across as strange to them. You, I want to take this different route. You know what? I actually disagree with um, most most of your defense agencies. I think that an advanced civilization, an advanced alien civilization, I think they would be friendly.
you think they would.
And here's why I say this.
I'm ready for this.
I say this because I say you ready for this. Okay. So here's the thing. In each society, as you progress technologically, so does your capacity to destroy. Right? So the more advanced you get, the more sophisticated you get, the more of your capacity to destroy things, like including people, the world around you, and all that type of stuff. Right? So something has to keep that in check. So if your technological sophistication advances past your morality, which is the only thing that's keeping that in check from destroying everything, you're going to cease to exist. Imagine. Do you remember the story in the Bible when it was Moses and the Mennonites like destroy all? He's like destroy everybody. He including the children, the young boys, and every woman that's been with a man and all that type of stuff. And he's like, and save the virgins for yourselves.
Hmm.
Imagine if someone like that had a nuke. Right? I mean, it'd be catastrophe.
Yeah, I
The
mean,
reason
to the
the
extent
reason
of
they
mutually
exist
exclusive
now
structure.
is because they're in more responsible hands.
Yeah,
We've progressed not just technologically but also morally. Like slavery, which was ubiquitous at the time, you know, is now frowned upon like almost universally. Um, how about male and female equality? You know, like these are like moral truths that we've developed. If we don't advance morally along with our capacity to destroy, we're going to wind up destroying ourselves, and a civilization would never be able to reach the level requisite to um for interstellar travel
yeah. So I
or
mean, I
interstellar
think what you're
communication. In my
referring
opinion,
to collectively, and you may have heard the term, is called the Great Filter.
yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there's the
Uh,
concept, if you've never heard of it, that this great filter exists. That once you've become sufficiently advanced to make contact with other civilizations, assuming they exist, that you've probably already destroyed yourself. um,
yeah, essentially. And so yeah, that's like if they've reached that point, then they're probably on another level morally. I mean, I would expect this civilization, as advanced as they are technologically, I expect them to get here and to be like, "What? Y'all have prisons?
yeah,
Which I need those for? They have cops? What?
Right.
Y'all are still like
They would be
still have
baffled.
crime.
Yeah, they would be baffled by some of the silliness that went on.
Yeah, they probably be something more like vegans. You know, um, they probably look at us as savages.
Yeah, I mean, maybe even closer to like Jainism,
Yeah, yeah.
where
So something
they're
like that.
literally so
That's what
concerned.
I would expect.
Yeah,
So I would expect them to be friendly. I wouldn't expect some sort of violent empire that we so often see portrayed in the movies.
yeah. While we're on the topic, obviously the DoD advice, the Department of Defense just essentially completely advises against any form of communication, and in the scenario in which Geo brought up on the phone before we got here, we'll use that one specifically when considering their DoD advice because that's the concept or the idea that they had in mind when discussing this, and that was if humans perchanced upon either the remnants or the existence of a Dyson sphere, and that's just a sufficiently advanced way of harnessing a star's energy, which is beyond anything that humans have currently done, and basically that would make them probably closer to a Class A civilization, which is harnessing maybe a Class B, but definitely not Class C, which is what we are, which is harnessing energy that we have available ready on Earth. Um, and Class B would be essentially to the energies of your solar system. And then Class A is energies throughout the universe and being able to harness and utilize energies throughout each of them is how you would define or classify civilizations. And a Dyson sphere would put you much closer to a B or an A than like something like Class C, which is just utilizing the energy available on your planet. In our case, we have dinosaurs that used to exist, which have, those few that have been fossilized, but the rest of them have basically been underground, and the pressure and heat have turned them into this lovely thing that we call oil that we love and go and get and burn because it's great for powering our motor vehicles and other things. But other things like wind and solar, which is, closer to, the next level of civilization. But in the instance of a Dyson sphere, we would instantly know that they have energy harnessing technology that supersedes our own. So there are some implications that come along with that. And that is like, what if their weapons and space travel and pretty much everything else also supersedes our own? And the DoD advice, from basically everything I can tell, just says we wouldn't want to make contact with such a planet or such an existence.
Yeah.
Would
I'd be curious. I'd be more curious about the way they view us than
then how we
than
view
what we
them?
could expect to learn from them. You know, you ever think about this? Like, so what if they have some sort of how about this? So you had mentioned earlier that there was um the civilization or some tribe, and they didn't have the a very complex number system, right? They had one, two, and many, or one, two, and some, or something like that, right?
Yeah, one, two, and then like mini. They may have had a three.
Y-
I don't remember specifically. This was a linguistics case I studied back in college, but it was called
Gotcha. So, but
Hicksariana, and it was done by
either
the
way,
linguist Dan
it
Everett.
was far more primitive than the Arabic number system we use right now, right?
Yeah, I mean,
So
much more simplistic and for sure.
yeah, so I was thinking like, what if we're doing that, but just on a more sophisticated level, where like there's some sort of truth about the universe that we're just unable to discover just because of the way we do math, or the way our logic works. Like we could there might be some truths that we're just unable to even um, realize exists just because of there's some error, or our system is just too primitive. and maybe they figured it out, and they have no way of communicating to us because of that barrier. I
Yeah,
mean, I
I
guess
mean
I'm jumping back into communication
yeah, that's what I said. I
portion,
think
but
that's undoubtedly going to be that, and I'll hold to it that like important communication or informative communication is going to be the most important aspect of anything that we talk about here. Because without it, there's no way to share information or to glean information without just strict observation. And if it comes to something like a really, really advanced concept or universal theory that we haven't talked about or ever discovered, or maybe even are currently incapable of wrapping our minds around, like trying to explain how gravity works to a dog. Like,
yeah, I mean, essentially, yeah.
yeah, it would be really difficult to, make the two work. So meaningful communication is undoubtedly the most important thing. The
Yeah,
fortunate thing is that as
the,
humans we're relatively intelligent, but there could be this level of intelligence that supersedes humanity by
yeah, that's
so
what I was
much that
saying.
it
You said
eclipses.
relatively intelligent.
Yeah. I mean, we're
Yeah,
relatively intelligent
relative to
to
us.
every other
Yeah,
species on the planet. However,
yeah. And,
it,
and you know what? That may play a major part in whether or not they're hostile or friendly to us. I mean, they they get here and we're so lacking. Hold on one second, engine. Sorry, my daughter's here. But so yeah, I mean, like, instead of them viewing us as equals, they view us as, I guess, some sort of
lesser
nanny.
species or
Right?
even
Yeah.
like,
And so, like, them taking as they see themselves as being the benevolent babysitters taking care of us, and that be maybe we interpret that as a hostility, but they may not see it that way. So even what I was describing as them coming here and being extremely moral, because of making far more. They have a moral system that's just as advanced as their technological sophistication. There's no guarantee that we would be treated in a way that we prefer.
yeah, I mean, essentially because there could be completely different biological and other factors that what they may find pleasing or ideal may be completely opposed to how humanity survived and or thrived.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, but what if they don't even place a value on intelligence? Like, here's an assumption. Like, let's say, like, the aliens get here, and they want to help, right? And so they say, one way they can help us, they show us how to completely eradicate the coronavirus. That's an assumption that they would place more value on humans than they would the virus.
Yeah,
But there's no guarantee that that's the case.
right. Given that the virus
May,
is indeed a living thing,
yeah, they,
if
they
it,
may look at us as the problem.
yeah, because we're attempting to kill the virus, and the virus is, basically
Yeah, the virus is minding its
thriving
own business.
and
You know?
thriving on its own. It doesn't have, whereas humans
Yeah,
are
exactly.
considerate beings, and I say that not to mean that we're kind. I mean that we consider things. We're actively going out of our way to eradicate this virus.
Yeah,
Whereas the
I mean,
virus,
it's
in and
just,
of itself,
yeah,
doesn't
exactly
have
that. I mean, it's
consideration
just
of
a reminder.
humans.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, whereas the virus itself doesn't have consideration of humans or consideration in general. It just lives.
Yeah, I mean, like, when we think about this, I mean, we're just projecting tons of our assumptions on um, this hypothetical alien civilization that has a very different, evolutionary history. There's no reason to assume that they're going to place value on in the same way that we do.
Yeah, so I mean, it causes issues, which is, I mean, again, going back to that meaningful communication is almost necessary. Otherwise, like, And even then, it would take a lot to basically give a rundown of the history of the human race and e- explain why we do certain things. So it would be very difficult, I think, to have. I mean, it would take a long time to form a connection with an alien life, assuming we made contact with such. At least I think it would.
I agree. Well, what do you think in a scenario where I think you were talking about earlier, like when we get like a radio signal, and let's assume we've somehow we've discovered that this is from an intelligent um race that's outside of Earth.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
essentially,
what do you think is like some international implications of that?
so I mean, I think that depends on how the radio signal is received, but um, let's say hypothetically it's a broadcast in which pretty much scanning frequencies across the technologically advanced countries of Earth basically received and interpreted the signal to be that from an alien life form, right? At that point, you have countries now probably deciding on their own how they're going to handle things before some sort of international meeting is held. They're surely, I think the governments across the board are going to hold some sort of meeting to discuss what's happening. Now, whether that be, some sort of something like a peace summit or a United Nations meeting or something new and, specifically designed for this, I think at some point the nations across the country are going to at least get together and discuss what the implications are of receiving such communication.
You think the United States were? I think we'd be more likely to keep it secret. Let's
Well, I
say
mean,
like
what if it was
United
broadcast?
States
That's
gets
why
a
I set up the scenario in which it was broadcast.
broadcast. Okay,
Yeah,
so everybody
yeah,
get this message.
yeah. Essentially, anyone that was scanning radio frequencies would come across this. So some of your poorest countries probably would not, or may miss it by
Yeah,
chance. But most of your advanced or advancing cultures and countries in the world are going to know this happened.
yeah.
It's not
I
something
mean,
you
at
can
that
keep
point, be
secret from
pretty,
other
pretty hard to
countries.
keep it secret.
Yeah, it's not something you're going to be able to keep secret from other countries, especially if it was
Yeah,
a catered message to people on Earth.
yeah. I think there want to be some agreement on how contact is made. Like we would want a very neutral party. You know, that's gonna um
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I
send a
feel like,
message back.
yeah. I mean, I feel like at this point it could potentially go into chaos because you'd have like, especially with some of your more, um, I'm not sure the word I should use here, but we'll use the word flamboyant, even though it kind of means what I want it to mean, and there's a little implications of things it doesn't. But I'm going to use flamboyant leaders like those of North Korea
Yeah.
or former President Trump that probably would not react like everyone else might. um, and I'm not saying how either one of those people would react in this specific situation. It just seems that, um,
It'll
obviously,
reaffirm reaffirm Trump's space force.
well, I mean,
I mean,
so you have
my opinion, I think it was a big waste of money. But like, if we got a message like that, that would definitely, you know,
yeah, I
prove
mean, like
its
it just seemed
usefulness.
like there was a lot of ego on display when you had Kim Jong Un and Donald Trump going back and forth at each other, with North Korea saying, we may bomb the United States, and then Donald Trump was like, "Try it, I dare you." It didn't seem like a good idea, and for either side. I don't want war. I don't want people bombing each other. But it's a really bad idea when you have someone that is making idle threats but has potential capability to perform them, and then someone who's just like, I dare you because I have bigger guns.
Do you mean
that's not.
like in a scenario where there's a threatening message
But
coming from
I mean, potential
from
threatening. Or
space?
even, I mean, like, I don't even necessarily know that it has to be threatening for certain countries, groups, leaders, etc., to want to instantly try to attack or show off what we have as far as weapons capabilities. It just doesn't seem that far
Yeah, I mean,
fetched to
yeah,
me.
I don't disagree at all.
Yeah, it doesn't seem that far fetched to
Real-
me to consider that there would be at least certain individuals or people within our current government or people formerly in our government or people in other governments that are more than willing to say, "Oh, great, aliens, let's kill these guys." That way we don't have to worry about it. Problem solved.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it may be a good idea to assume that they're hostile until demonstrated otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we don't want to them they come here and then we find out the hard way, you know.
And then now, so since we were talking earlier, I'll provide this lovely segue. What do you think international implications would be, supposing that humans discovered something like a Dyson sphere?
Um,
So in this case,
I
instead of
think
human or instead of aliens making direct contact with us in some way, we discover what is obviously, if nothing more than remnants, but likely a advanced civilization of life existing outside of Earth in the form of we come across this Dyson sphere. We happen to be observing things going on in that area, and then we picked up on, you know, this pattern that was happening, and then as we continued to observe the pattern, we decided to point a telescope in that direction. We were fortunate, and we were able to see far enough away to determine this Dyson sphere exists, therefore proving a advanced civilization exists on in this area. What do you
I
think?
think one
Yeah,
if
if let's say the United States did this first, or what if something
yeah,
like Russia or China did this first? What do you think would happen?
if we spotted it and we saw the Dyson sphere, um, I mean, one thing that think about is like how far is this Dyson sphere? I mean, if it's
Let's
several million light years
yeah,
away,
let's go with a
it
conservative estimate and say that it's within reach of future lifetime, so one light
gotcha
year
like
away.
10 light years
Yeah,
away,
I would say one light year away, just for fun.
1 light year away. Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
because
that's really
even
close. All
yeah,
right,
that's close.
yeah, that's really close. So we see that that's going to be scary because for one, they're already more advanced than we are because we don't know how to build a Dyson sphere. We don't even know where we even get the materials from. So that's one thing to consider. Also, maybe they may be so much more advanced that they have no no desire to even communicate with us. I mean, just think about this. Like, what if like some primitive society, some primitive civilization, you know, put a note um in a basket and sent it upstream and saying, "Hey, we're human" or something like that. I mean, like, would you be interested in talking back? You probably just look at this and be like, it's trash. I don't care about talking with these people. So I mean, there's no guarantee that they want to even speak with us back. But
Yeah, I mean,
I,
like
I think
there's two things that come to
I
mind. I think, and it really comes down to like a personal preference, and I think in some ways, but like, is the curiosity there strong enough to desire communication? So let's just say hypothetically, I think I'm the only person that exists on this island, and I've never seen any other person ever. And then one day, I get like symbols and pictures and stuff handwritten, or what appear to be handwritten, in a bottle on the coast of my island. And it takes me a long time to determine that it appears that another sufficiently advanced person exists on another island. Would I take time to bother trying to communicate back? I think that's kind of what it boils down to.
yeah Yeah, I mean, I guess like in that scenario, like if you thought you were the only person that was that like existed, and you got a message, even if it was really primitive, I think I would at least try to develop like a two-way communication.
Yeah, so
But
I mean, like
let's say
as far
they're
as we're
already
concerned,
familiar with,
I think
you know,
we're go ahead.
oh, I also say like if that civilization is already familiar, with several dozen or maybe hundreds of other life forms, they may not care to speak to us.
Yeah, but I meant as far as Earth going, and at least as far in my example, we
Uh huh.
think we
Maybe I missed
currently.
the point.
I was gonna say we currently think we're the only ones. We
Yeah,
are
definitely.
the single person on Earth, and the message
Yeah.
in the bottle would be the sufficiently advanced technology out there trying to communicate with us, and that would be even though we're still in the dark on a lot of things, would humans try to communicate back?
Yeah.
Because humans think, as far as I know, at least on the grand scale, we think, and as far as we've observed, we think we are the island. We think we're the guy on the island.
Yeah.
Humans are the only sufficiently advanced technology within our reach.
Yeah,
However,
definitely.
if something came along, like a message in the bottle, and basically gave proof to otherwise, would we take time to try to figure out and respond?
I think we would definitely try to figure out what the message says. Whether or not we respond, I think that'd be up for debate.
Mm. Well, I mean, that's the
Because
whole purpose of the show, right?
it may not be wise to respond. Like, because I mean, like even in my scenario when I was saying how that I think they would be benevolent due to their advanced morals. There's no guarantee that that would result in the treatment that we both desire for us. They may view as their actions as benevolent, but we may not interpret them that way.
Right. Because for them and
Kind of like,
the way that their civilization developed, things that may seem benevolent to them are completely opposed to us.
yeah, and maybe human life is not the target of their benevolence. I mean, so as a secular humanist, I'm pretty, like I'm pretty close minded on what I think um a friendly action would be. Like I'm tailoring it to humans.
Right. Yeah, you're
But there's no guarantee.
a humanist to the core, which means that if they were very very benevolent to bacteria, which happen to live, in human bodies, they may do
Hmm.
something to free those bacteria.
Yeah, and they may have more in common with bacteria than us. They may view the bacteria or a virus or whatever as more like them than us. And so they may not view us as in a way of something that's even deserving of any consideration at all. May not even cross their mind. Because kind of like this. If we were to let's say we were to go on Mars and we find like like a Martian, like a green person, right?
Right.
And the
Stereotypical
green
little green
person is
men.
sick. Yeah, it is stereotypical Martian, right? We find a little green guy, right? And we see he's sick, and we find some that he has like some sort of virus in him, and we wanted to help him. We probably go ahead and kill the virus without any thought about the virus is concerned. They
Right.
may, that's just because of the way that our worldviews has been shaped in here. They might view it differently. They
Yeah.
might kill the person to protect the virus without a second thought.
I think you're going a step too far, even. What if the virus is beneficial to that alien and we thought it was just harmful because it's harmful to humans?
I mean, yeah, I mean that's totally possible
Yeah, I mean,
as
like, we're
well.
like, oh, this very beneficial, oh, we'll kill this virus for you. Like, it has, let's say hypothetically it has something, like AIDS, and we're like, oh, this is AIDS on Earth, and AIDS on Earth is an autoimmune system issue. We know, and if we could, stick a needle in you, bada bing, bada boom, cure you of AIDS, but AIDS on Mars was extremely beneficial to their health for whatever reason. Like the
Yeah.
way their biology developed, like having this autoimmune, even though autoimmune deficiency syndrome in and of itself cannot be beneficial, for the sake of the argument, the actual virus, HIV, if we were like,
Hmm.
oh, bada bing, bada boom, let's clear you of this HIV, and HIV was integrally important to their development, and all of a sudden it killed them. Oops.
Yeah, I mean that's something to think about. They get they get here, and they like examine us, and they're like, "Yo, you have like this foreign organism inside your chest, and it's like beating about 100 times a minute. We're gonna pull this thing out.
Yeah, problem solved.
Save save your life here."
Save your life. Exactly. You have all this fluid, this red
Yeah,
fluid that's going throughout your body.
yeah,
I mean, it's surely it can't be good for you.
yeah. I mean, I I'd hope if they're advanced enough to get here, that they figure out that once they do that a few times and the organisms just stop moving,
Yeah.
because, because we're dead. Maybe they figured out, oh, maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe they need those things.
Yeah. All right. So
Hopefully.
let's take on the opposition of everything. What do you think would be the best possible scenario if we made contact to potentially friendly aliens? Since we've talked about hostility and we've talked about, like what happens if there's just like this we screwed up versus like, because obviously there's things that,
Yeah.
biology and stuff that they just may not understand. But let's just say hypothetically, we have meaningful communications with a potentially friendly alien race or civilization. What is the best possible thing that could happen because of it?
I think the best outcome that I would hope for is th- them to review to reveal scientific discoveries to us. Maybe they solved quantum gravity. They figured out what dark matter and dark energy was. They know what happened before the big bang. Like just sharing scientific knowledge with us. It- and and we can share I'm sure, even though they're more advanced than us, we would know things that they haven't figured out yet. Like we don't know how exactly to build a pyramid, now, even though we're more advanced than the Egyptians were, 6,000 years ago. So I'm sure that we know something that they don't know as well. So
Yeah, I mean,
that's
it's
what I think would be
essentially like,
best.
please give us your Wikipedia and we'll do the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Just sharing knowledge.
yeah,
That's what I think would be the best outcome.
yeah, and I mean, like beyond that, like there are potentially things like if we could develop a relationship that I think it could get even better. And what I mean by that
Oh
is
yeah,
that
definitely.
because they have certain information that we don't have and we have information that they don't have, they may think about the way we view things in a different way, which could lead to better discoveries. Or there's a missing piece of information on either side that the other person has, or a particular like mathematic formula or whatever that they've just never looked at in a certain way, and now the brightest minds of their civilization and our civilization are working on this together that could potentially solve problems that we were previously unable to do as individual civilizations.
Yeah, yeah. Essentially, when I was talking about that, like we might have a more sophisticated version of a one, two, and many.
Yep.
You know, they may be able to point that out. Like, hey, here's an error, not in your equations, but the error isn't actually in math itself, and maybe they have some more sophisticated version of it.
Yeah, I mean,
We
like
can work
even
together.
things like, for instance, like our current method of space travel or our current usage of like fossil fuels and whatnot. They may be like, oh, by the way, there's this way for efficiency's sake, that you can do this and utilize, like, even though we use a different particular fuel, Like, there's ways to make your efficiency increase tenfold or 100-fold or whatever that we just have never considered before because, things work differently here than they do on their planet. And
Yeah.
they may have, like, stumbled across something, and they've been using it for their whole history that we may have literally just be on the forefront of.
Yeah, man. That all those things would be awesome. Ma- If we find out, oh, you know what? There's actually a multiverse. String theory's right,
Yeah,
and you
and
can
I think that would be, like, some of the most incredible things to have. And I think if, maybe they don't even have things so sufficient as that, but any scientific or technological breakthrough that would be provided would be a step further for humanity than we've ever been, you know?
yeah.
So, other things that you wanted to take on? Because if not,
How
there's
about the worst
one
scenario?
I consider. Yeah, we'll take on the worst, and then there's one if you have time we may discuss.
Okay.
I didn't put my point up here, my contested point that I considered, and you'll see why if I mention it at all. If not, I'll tell you on the call after. Um,
Okay.
Worst possible outcomes is annihilation of humans as a species or the Earth as a planet.
Yeah.
I think that's the worst
They-
possible, like absolute worst possible. Like, they have sufficiently advanced technology and weaponry in which they literally obliterate the planet as a whole, or they obliterate life forms on the planet as a whole. They somehow take us as hostile, or they don't even see us as hostile. They see us as a necessary ground for taking our resources, and they just destroy us.
yeah, I mean that's my thoughts exactly. But they'll come here and just drain the earth of its resources. Like, oh, we're going to harness this core for whatever reason,
Yeah,
and
I
when now
mean,
we have a dead planet,
yeah, I mean,
no
essentially, we know that, like, once
magnetic
you,
sphere,
yeah, like,
or what you call it, magnetic shielding, whatever, that's blocking the deadly radiation from the sun.
yeah, I mean, essentially,
So
because we know that the Earth's core itself, we assume it's solid, but just around the core, there's this liquid magma that's primarily metal and molten rock and etc. They may come and just take that to help build additional Dyson spheres and stuff. They may be destroying
yeah,
planets to gain materials, or they may also use water. And since Earth is 70% covered in it, it's pretty beneficial to have Earth, because you can just come and
or
take our water.
turn the sun into a black hole for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, let's assume they're Class A civilization and they're literally harnessing energy throughout the universe. Well, turning the Earth or the sun into a black hole or causing it to supernova somehow would be very beneficial for them because the increase in output of energy.
Yeah, so
Like, they're just
yeah,
literally
I
harnessing
think we
energy
pretty
from the
much
sun.
agree on the
Yeah, I mean,
worst case
essentially, it
scenario.
would just be complete annihilation of humanity itself and/or the planet. I guess depending on how bad you want things to be, because humanity in and of itself could completely be decimated, but I guess some sort of bacterial and/or viral life form could go on, and that's still technically a better scenario. But not really, because humans would all be dead and we wouldn't be able to care or observe it,
True.
right? Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna throw it out here, and you can decide here and now if you'd like to discuss it. But there's one thing
All
that
right.
you did not bring up, and I will leave it up to you whether you'd like to discuss it on the podcast. I'd definitely like to discuss it in reality, and that's religious implications.
Ah.
Yeah.
I mean, we could have made a whole podcast on this one.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree, and I mean, if you'd like to do so in the future, or if anyone that's listening would like us to do so in the future, we could. I think,
yeah.
given, I'll just give a little bit of my history without getting too much in it. I grew up in a Christian environment, in a Christian home, and I was raised as a Christian, and I believed I was a Christian for a large period of my life. And I now identify as an atheist. And with that in mind, I am very familiar with things such as the Bible and biblical topics. And um, because of that, I had certain ideals and concepts in my head for a long time. that religious implications of something like alien life is very interesting to me on a personal level, but also at an intellectual level. So I think I could specifically dedicate an hour long to talking about religious implications of Christianity and coming into contact with alien life. But I think in general, religious implications are important when it comes to world religion and alien life. Because as far as I can tell, every religion on Earth is very specific to Earth.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I could see the implications of Hinduism. I could see the consequences, maybe not changing that much because they probably think that the alien is subject to reincarnation as well.
yeah,
I guess it
I
depends on how
agree.
different the alien too.
Yeah, I mean, I would
But
agree.
I
I think
mean,
that people like Hinduism and Buddhism, in which, you're basically trying to reach a stage of enlightenment, or you believe in something like reincarnation, your
yeah,
religious implications aren't nearly as great as, for instance, Islam or Christianity, in which you have necessary requirements or necessary beliefs to proceed to the afterlife in a good manner.
yeah. I'll say with any of the three Abrahamic religions, that
Yeah,
it's going to have very
yeah,
devastating consequences.
yeah. The third one there being Judaism. Sorry, I didn't mention it
Yeah.
in my process of like Islam or Christianity, but the three Abrahamic religions being Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And I think all three of those would have world changing views if alien life were to be proven real. And I'm not sure how any of them would take it. Because essentially you have a god or Allah or like whoever you want to call them. I would think they would all three refer to them as God, or you would commonly like any person, like whether you call it Allah or God or Yahweh, doesn't matter. I think as long as you're referring to some deity that has a specific course or nature in mind for Earth and humanity, uh, finding the existence of additional life would be confusing because now you
Yes,
have to wonder.
especially
Now you
if
have to
that
wonder if.
civilization goes back, several 100,000 years. For
Yeah,
like for most of you, like if you're evangelicals who think the universe is 6,000 years old, that's gonna create some problems right there.
yeah. I mean, like there's things like I'll mention Christianity because again, it was something I grew up in. There's people that are what you'd call young Earth creationists, um, that believe that the Earth is approximately 6,000 years old. That's going to cause a problem when you have like, oh, we've been around for hundreds of thousands of years. You have situations where, and again in Christianity, where you have someone dying for the sins of the Earth. Well, what if other planets are indeed quote unquote sinful, and there's
They're
only
not elect,
yeah, God only
not
had one.
elect.
God only had one son according to the Bible. So what's he gonna do to save those people? If you think he is indeed over all of those as well, unless you think your God is specific to Earth, and that's a whole different. Again, we could go into a whole a whole podcast specifically on this topic, which is why it's so fascinating and interesting to me. But I mean, I think in general it could potentially be world altering on a religious scale too. So if you have a minute, what would you say would be the biggest religious implication from like worldwide from alien interaction?
I think the one I think the most problematic one would be Christianity. I mean, of all the ones that I know of,
Yeah,
it would be, and specifically the more evangelistic form that we see in the United States. I think th- you're gonna draw you're gonna run into the most problems with that one.
yeah, and I think I mean we're almost out of time. If it's okay with you, I'd like to put a challenge on a call out if that's okay with you.
Sure, go ahead.
That being, sorry, I didn't mean to put the starting in screen up. If you see that here in just a second, I'm going to the thanks for watching page with our. But a challenger to call out is if you're watching this or if you watch it on any of our platforms, be it Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, etc. If you get it shared with you or whatever, and you're either part of the three Abrahamic religions or you're not part of it, A, we don't mean to exclude you. B, uh, something that we would like to know is just like genuinely how would you react. So please send us a message or reach out to us, contact us if you'd like to be on the show in the future, discuss this. We'd love to dedicate an entire show to it because it's something that I think both of us would find fascinating and both of us would enjoy discussing and debating. But if you're specifically part of the three Abrahamic religions, which I think would comprise of, a large portion of Americans, which is where both of us are located, or if you're part of, Eastern culture that believes in something like Hinduism, Buddhism, Shinto, etc., uh, like how would you react to the discovery of alien life as far as your religion specifically is concerned? So, if you're watching or if you come across this and you have religious beliefs, reach out to us and send us a message either on Facebook or send us a comment on YouTube. Send us an email. We have a ton of ways you can contact us. We'd love to hear from you. The whole purpose of this, again, is to let your voice be heard. So even though we get up here and we can debate for pretty much on any topic by ourselves, we love having guest callers on. We love when guest callers call in or guest speakers come on and join us because it's just a way to get another perspective on things. And we like having our own perspectives in check and having other people that have different worldviews or different points of views give us that feedback. So even if it never gets on the show, it's still fascinating for us, which is why we do it. Um, with that in mind, any last things you wanted to add as far as implications of alien life?
No, that's it for me.
Yeah, I mean, there are a ton of ways we could have gone and a ton of scenarios in which you can cover. There's no way we could possibly ever cover them all. Uh, but if there's something specific that you wanted us to talk about, even if it's doing a mid-time shorter episode or something, we can make it happen for you. Um, Thank you so much for watching and listening and giving us a little bit of your time. If you'd like, please consider giving us a follow or subscribe to our channel. We'd love to have you here. We'd love to have you chatting back and forth within our chat. We listen and read all of our comments. We respond to messages accordingly. Anything you wanted to add to it, Gio?
Oh, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week.
Absolutely. We'll be doing something next week. We'll try to get our topic out and posted at least on Facebook, maybe the website, for next week, depending on what we're going to cover. And if there's something specific that any of our viewers or listeners would like us to do, please send it to us and we'll consider it. And if it's not next week or the week after, we'll try to make it happen for you. Okay. Thanks again, guys. We're gone.